On June 20th, 1987, in the mountains of Ararat, Turkey officially recognized the discovery of Noah's Ark. Located on a mountainside about 15 miles south of the volcanic Mount Ararat, the remains of the massive ship were dedicated during a special ceremony. Guest of honor was Ron Wyatt, due to his 10 years of research at the site. The story began in 1957 during the Cold War, when aerial photos taken of eastern Turkey while searching for Soviet missile bases revealed a strange boat-shaped formation in the mountains about 6,300 feet above sea level. Life magazine reported on the story after an expedition from the United States went to the site in 1960. Blowing holes in the strange formation, the members of the team came away with the conclusion that there was nothing there of any archaeological interest. Ron Wyatt, like many others, read the story, but he was of the opinion that the site needed further exploration. There had been many claims of seeing Noah's Ark on the volcanic Mount Ararat, but Ron knew that it was a stratovolcano, and he believed that nothing would have been able to survive there. He noted the biblical account of the location of the ark. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. Urartu, the biblical Ararat, was a large region in eastern Turkey. This location was certainly feasible. But the factor that captured his interest the most was the length given in the Life magazine story: 500 feet. Most people were looking for a 437-foot Noah's Ark based on the Hebrew cubit, but Ron again went to the Bible to learn more. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Moses was the author of the Genesis account of the flood. He would have known the cubit of the Egyptians. The Hebrew cubit didn't come into existence until there was a Hebrew nation after Moses' death. The Encyclopedia Britannica stated, "The Egyptian cubit is generally recognized as having been the most ubiquitous or universal standard of linear measurement in the very ancient world. The royal cubit equals 20.62 inches. This would mean Noah's Ark was much longer than 437 feet. 17 years after the Life magazine article, Ron finally made the journey to Turkey. When he saw the boat-shaped object, he saw that it looked just like it did in 1960, and he knew he would need permission to excavate in order to learn anything about what was beneath the surface. So he returned home and enlisted a number of friends to help him pray for an earthquake to reveal more. In late 1978, he learned of an earthquake in eastern Turkey and returned in August of 1979. When he arrived, he was overwhelmed by what he saw. The earthquake had dropped the soil around the object, and a large crack extended the entire length. He could see what looked to him like the remains of decayed rib timbers along the now exposed sides. Also, he was able to measure the depth of the debris and measure the length. It was 515 feet, or exactly 300 Royal Egyptian cubits. He was now convinced. He carefully combed the surface, looking for evidence that it was a shipwreck. He saw what he believed were petrified structures of an ancient ship whose deck had collapsed. He saw what looked like deck joists and deck support timbers. Of particular interest was the fact that the ship appeared to be impaled on a large outcropping of limestone. He concluded that this indicated that the ship had slid into the rock from another location. Before he made his first trip to Turkey, he had done an experiment in a nearby lake, building mountain configurations out of rocks and floating a boat model by them to see the reaction of the boat. He noted that a crescent shape caused the water to pull the boat into the crescent where the boat remained and gently floated. The present location did not fit with the results of that experiment, so Ron decided to examine the area above the boat shape. The site was in a moving mud flow, so he followed the mud flow up the mountainside. About 1.5 miles up, he found a crescent shape of mountains. He saw that the mud flow began up here. When he arrived near the top of the ridge, he found an ancient stele, like an ancient billboard, which depicted the boat shape, the familiar mountain ridge, several birds, and 8 faces within the boat shape. Clearly, this was a reference to the ship of Noah and its 8 survivors. He noticed a taller mountain peak on the stele that was no longer visible from that location. He concluded that it was a small volcano that had erupted long after Noah's Ark had landed, and that it had carried the ship down the mountainside about 1 mile, where it was impaled on the limestone outcropping, then covered in lava. The lava then encased the ship like a time capsule. The volcano then collapsed after expending its lava and was no longer visible. He then theorized that as the lava began to decay, water seeped in and allowed the remains to be petrified or fossilized by the process called mineral replacement. Molecule by molecule would be washed away from the remains and replaced by molecules from the objects and substances above it. As he examined the area within the crescent shape, he found a large section, 120 by 40 feet, approximately, of what appeared to be fossilized wood in the ground. He believed this to be the bottom of the ship, the original landing site. His conclusion was that when the floodwaters subsided, the ark sank into the muddy earth. This held the ship upright. Then God sent the wind to dry the face of the earth. The portion of the ship that sank into the mud was now firmly embedded in the ground. Many years later, when the lava carried the ship down the mountain, the main body of the ship was ripped loose. Only this section remained in their original location. Around this area that Ron believed to be embedded petrified wood, he found specimens of rock which looked very unique to him. He took several samples, along with several specimens from the boat shape below. Back home, he sent them for analysis. The results showed organic carbon, which indicated that the samples were consistent with decayed and fossilized wood. They also contained metals such as iron and aluminum. The analysis of the strange-looking rock Ron had found about 1.5 miles above the site by the bottom of the ship was clearly the most exciting. His initial analysis had shown it to be metals and not rock. In 1984, Ron met and became friends with Colonel Jim Irwin, the former astronaut. Colonel Irwin was searching for Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat, but he was very gracious and was interested in seeing the boat-shaped site. Ron had brought a metal detector to the site to see if there was a pattern of metal readings. In the presence of Colonel Irwin and others on his team, Ron employed the detectors. He found distinct metal lines down the entire length of the object, while no metal readings were obtained just outside of it. Ron asked Colonel Irwin, who had impressive scientific community connections, if he could have the strange specimen tested. Colonel Irwin sent the specimen to Los Alamos National Labs, where geophysicist John Baumgartner performed the analysis. The results of that analysis captured Dr. Baumgartner's interest. The specimen contained manganese, also titanium and aluminum, among others, and these were not in the form found in nature. Due to the sophistication of the metals, he questioned whether a missile had crashed on the mountainside and Ron had found the remains. The exciting evidences of the metal lines and the analysis of the specimens brought two new researchers into the work, Dr. Baumgartner and David Fasold, a marine salvage expert who knew all about ships and their construction. They both joined the team.
Oh, look at that. Oh, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute, let me get a close-up of that. Kind of,
You want my hand in there for?
Yeah, just to point at those little flakes of iron that are coming out, like right there. There and there.
Huh.
That's a strong reading. Well,
I'd say that those frames right there.
okay. Keep walking. Do you want a measuring tape to measure these things, how far apart they are?
John, as a scientist, might I take the liberty here to ask you, do you really honestly believe that you have been on the remains of Noah's Ark?
I have no doubt in my mind. This has to be a man-made structure. It's full of metal. The metal has a regular pattern to it, and the size of the thing and the shape of the thing is such that it's almost certainly a large boat.
Dr. Baumgartner and Ron scanned the entire site with 3 different types of metal detectors. Placing rocks at each metal reading, they then attached tapes to show the lines. This exciting evidence also attracted the interest of ABC's 2020.
The boat-shaped site was first found and photographed by a Turkish army captain back in 1959. It was quickly explored and dismissed as a freak of nature. But Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist, rekindled interest in it a few years ago. He brought in Dave Fasold, a marine salvage expert, to assess it. The Doomsday Mountain team brought in some high technology to explore the oldest legend of man.
There's one.
They began scanning their site with a molecular frequency generator. It's a device used by surgeons to pinpoint cancer tumors, and it's been used by Fasold to locate underwater treasure. This time, the molecular frequency generator began to pick up a unique pattern of iron lines beneath the earth.
Okay, bring that one up.
They began placing ribbons along those lines. The finished shape, outlined by the ribbons, was that of a huge ship, the approximate length and width of Noah's Ark, as described in the Bible. The fascinating field of ribbons soon attracted higher academic interest.
That looks like iron. Okay.
Dr. John Baumgartner, a physicist with Los Alamos Laboratories, sent samples back to the lab for analysis and confirmed that the metal they were tracing with the ribbons was indeed iron. With the width and the length known, the only remaining question was depth. By locating the depth of the hull, they could determine if the boat-shaped object had the cargo capacity described in the biblical ark. To resolve this final issue, Wyatt and Fasold brought geologist Tom Finner to Turkey with his company's heavy-duty subsurface radar equipment. Gear like this located the black box cockpit recorder on the floor of the frozen Potomac River after the Air Florida crash. It was here, several miles short of the boat-shaped site, that a waiting game began for Finner and the others. The party needed a final go-ahead from the Turkish government to complete their probe of Doomsday Mountain. The restrictions of martial law left the American explorers isolated from the outside world. Not even a telephone.
Anyway, we're going to hang in like smell on a skunk till there's nothing left to get this done.
hanging like the smell in a skunk. The Turkish government stopped the exploration. What now?
Since we were there, Barbara, things have cooled down, and they've sent their own team of scientists in to take a look at this site. It's a very fascinating location.
While Turkish scientists and archaeologists did their own research, Ron and his associates continued their work. The next step was subsurface interface radar.
There's the longitudinal bulkhead. You ought to see them popping out, Ron.
Yeah, there they are.
Here, there's
Yeah.
another one. There's the keel line right there.
Yeah.
Oh, Ron, the lines are there! The lines are there!
Okay, we're gonna walk over,
Yeah, let's walk.
take a look.
Leave it running so everybody knows that we're not cheating here, right?
You got it, Toby.
Okay, now, this is the west bulkhead. Okay, can you look through there? And
All right,
this is the west bulkhead.
all right.
That was over there. And he walked easterly. Here we start getting the longitudinal bulkheads. Here, 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 here.
Okay.
Here. You see there how it shows up?
All right.
The initial scans were very impressive, showing internal structure consistent with bulkheads and rooms. But to be sure they were interpreting the data correctly, Ron took the scan printouts to Geophysical Survey Systems, the developer and manufacturer of the radar.
This data does not represent natural geology. It's a man-made structure. These reflections are occurring very periodic, too periodic to be random natural type interface.
There was no longer any doubt that this was the remains of something man-made. In late 1986, the Turks announced their decision. The ceremony was set for June 1987. During that ceremony, the governor asked Ron to demonstrate the radar on site for the journalists and military officials. When Ron showed them a readout that he said looked like an intact timber, the governor then instructed a soldier to dig right there. What emerged was this petrified section of fossilized hand-wrought timber. Sectioning showed it to be laminated wood, 5 layers of timber glued together with pitch, clearly visible oozing from the end. This fossilized specimen shows that rivets were used in its construction. Their analysis showed that they contained iron, titanium, and aluminum, among other things, very sophisticated alloys that would be resistant to water. Specimens falling out from the lower end of the ship, identified as slag by an expert in metallurgy, indicated to Ron that Noah filled the hull with slag material from his metal production of the fittings used to build the Ark. More complete radar scans revealed a ship, although damaged and collapsed in places, of very intelligent, modern design with a ramp system at the door which led to each level. In 1990, Ron performed what he called a mini excavation, where he took shovels and bent the blades into a giant razor. He and his associates then shaved off a very thin layer from one section, smoothing it to show the color difference between the structure members and the matrix. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world, and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be.
The earth did quake, and the rocks rent.
But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. And there are three that bear witness in earth, the Spirit, and the water, and the blood. And these three agree in one. If we receive the witness of men, the witness of God is greater. For this is the witness of God, which he hath testified of his Son.
So anyway, I was walking along the cliff face behind this bus station back in this area. I was walking through there. My left hand went out without my brain doing it, and my mouth said, "That's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant's in there." Well, I was dumbfounded. This sort of thing doesn't happen to me. In fact, I resist that sort of thing because people that I consider wackos say they have those kinds of experiences. And I still think that most of them that say they have these experiences are wackos. But sometimes, in other words, I don't feel comfortable with that kind of experience. But our tickets were due the next morning, so we flew home. I told the man, he said, "That's wonderful." He says, "We'll let you dig there. We'll give you all the help you need, a place to stay, provide you food, do your laundry." And this is Israeli. They don't do that. We went home, and I had no idea why the Ark of the Covenant had been there. I'd never even thought about it. My cup was running over already with things that God has shown me. And so, I was not looking for anything else. So I went home, prayed, and asked the Lord to help me understand why the Ark of the Covenant might possibly be in that place. I was impressed to read the history of the conquest of Jerusalem, and in this 2 Kings chapter 25, it says that Nebuchadnezzar built forts against the city round about. That in modern language is a siege wall. Now this meant that nobody could take anything out of the city or bring anything in the city. So the Ark of the Covenant had to be hidden in the city, under the city, or inside the siege wall. All right? Well, we don't know for sure where the Babylonian siege wall was located, but we know where Titus's siege wall was located. All right? Catapults had the same range back in Nebuchadnezzar's time as they did in Titus's time. And they always built these siege walls out of range of the catapults that were defending the city. So we know where it had to have been. And from that siege wall, people could not observe, watchmen walking the wall, the siege wall, couldn't observe somebody bringing something out into that cliff over there. So I thought, okay, that makes it reasonable. We got ready, came back and started digging. January 1979. In January 6, 1982, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I found the Ark of the Covenant. Right? You would not believe the amount of stone and dirt and everything we had seen. The little Arab guy that was letting us eat at his restaurant, he was a full-grown man, but he's about that tall and small, petite. So as we went through this cave system, he would crawl into the chambers, and I'd give him a light, and he'd shine it around, and I'd peek through to see if it looked like anything in there. So we did this over and over, and we came to this one hole after we had, you wouldn't believe where all we had gone in that cave. And at this point in time, we had gone about 45 feet down and then back up. And here this hole was in the wall, about that big around, and there was a stalactite hanging right down the middle of it. It's the only stalactite I had seen in the cave that wasn't just little ones. This was a big one, and I have it in my collection of things. So I broke it off, made the hole big enough for him to get in, and he was crawling in there, and I started to hand him the light so he could do what we had been doing, several days. He came tearing out of there. His eyes were big as human eyes can get. And he said, "What's in there? What's in there? I'm not going back in there." And I said, "Well, what did you see?" He said, "I didn't see anything." And I thought, well, okay. Now, he'd been in tighter places than that and had not responded that way. So I got this little beam of light, in a very dark place here. And I thought, that is divine terror. That's supernatural terror. So I figured that is either where the Ark of the Covenant is, or it's the way to get to it, one or the other. And God doesn't want this fella to know where it is. So anyway, he just said, I must get out of here, so I'll be there. So I made the hole big enough for me to get in. I got in there, and folks, it was full of rocks, bigger than these here, up to within 18 inches or so of the ceiling. If this young man hadn't been terrorized and come scooting out of there like he did, I would not have gone in that place. Through these rocks, we've been doing thousands of them for 3 years. So anyway, I crawled in there with the flashlight, and I crawled around on top of the rocks, and I shined the light down between the cracks in the rock, and there a flat gold thing reflected back at me. So I moved over and shined down to another. There was 2 reflections, one here, one there, and one over here. So I knew it was a flat gold top. And I thought, the Ark of the Covenant, I forgot about the cherubims, sitting on top. They'd have been poking up through the top of the mercy seat. But anyway, I started moving these rocks, and I stuck them everywhere I could. By the time I got down to that gold surface, I had them behind my shoulders, leaning back against them, and it was the table of showbread. Well, hey, that's not a bad thing, huh? But anyway, I was looking for the Ark of the Covenant. And it was only then that I took time to carefully examine the rest of the chamber. See, I had just crawled in, took a quick look, and started checking down under the rocks. So as I moved the flashlight along the wall, I saw a stone box sitting against the wall about this low this much space between it and the ceiling. The lid was broke, slid around, and right above it was a crack with dark brown-looking material at the bottom on the bottom of this crack, and I was able to see the top of the lid of the box. On both sides of the broken pieces was more of this brown stuff. All of a sudden, I realized I was sitting in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and that Christ's blood had poured out. I had never heard anybody preach anything about that sort of possibility. And it was too much for me. When I regained consciousness and looked at my watch, again, 45 minutes had passed from the time I crawled in the chamber. Because I figured I'd find the Ark of the Covenant in there, I wanted to know what time it was. So anyway, it was 2 o'clock when I entered the chamber. And after I regained consciousness, it was 2:45. I couldn't see down in there.
If you were to visit the Garden Tomb today in Israel, you would be able to see the tomb that Jesus Christ rose from. You can see the skull, where the Bible describes it as Skull Hill, Golgotha. And you can also see the place where they covered up Ron Wyatt's excavation, the place where Jesus Christ was crucified. And it's pretty hidden, so you have to know where it is. This family here, who is visiting the Garden Tomb, fortunately for them, the gardener knew where Ron Wyatt's excavation was. Then they met a guy who said some pretty interesting things, who's putting the puzzle pieces together and connecting the dots. So have a listen to what he has to say as well.
As in heaven, so on earth, this was God's desire, because he knew that we were slaves to sin. We were slaves to the slave owner at the time, and the slave owner had been, ownership had been given over to the devil. Well, when he actually was crucified, it was the innocent lamb, the lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. Well, it says that he took his blood into the heavenly holy of holies, but also as in earth, because it says there's three witnesses in the earth: the blood, the water, and the spirits. so the blood and the water came out of the side of Jesus. At the time of the crucifixion, there was a great earthquake, and the rocks were rent. And of course, you can see, if you go back there, you can see where they filled it in, but I can't, I saw it before it got filled in. They literally filled in the cracks that came down through here.
So you yourself saw?
I saw it before they filled it in, and you can see it on the other side where they did fill it in, but the crack comes down here, and the crack came down, and it was right at the base of the cross. And so then after Jesus had died, Spirit, out came blood and water, poured down, and it dropped onto the mercy seat.
Right. Exactly. So then, you've been to Zedekiah's tunnel or caves or whatever and in there and everything?
I know essentially
where it is.
How to get in.
So that's two things we wanted to do today was come here and see this and go to his tunnel and kind of just see. We don't want to obviously try to find it, but because you actually saw Ron Wyatt and met him.
Yeah.
What was your name?
Robert. I mean, it was 30 years ago.
Really? Wow.
And so I was just sitting across the table. I was a proud young kid, and I talked to him for a while, and then I realized how stupid I am, because when you're in the presence of somebody who's humble, and then your pride gets really shown for what it is, and so that was pretty.
So so it's underneath us.
This is the Ark of the Covenant, and why people don't understand it. They don't. I guess they don't understand the covenant. They don't understand the blood. They don't understand what God was doing.
Right.
The reason we have the freedom in the spirit that we have is because the blood's down
on the ark. It was supposed to anoint the ark. I know.
And that's what made it so that we can have the spirit, because it's holy. I heard that they sent 6 people in to try to pull that out of there.
Yeah, and they died.
Right. Do you know why?
They weren't allowed to be in there yet. Papa said no.
But do you know why?
Well, then, is there more?
They would profane the ark. Yeah. Well, what's profaning the ark? Well, what's on the ark? What's on there? The blood is. What's the blood doing? It's speaking a better thing than that of Abel. And the thing is, it's the throne of God in the earth, as in heaven, so on earth. We got something rocking. I say rocking, but we got something going on here. This is, to understand. That won't be messed with until that which restrains him is taken away.
Exactly.
And when that happens, we're going to have hell revealed on this earth, and that's the great tribulation.
Important witness that is going to be an important witness.
Right.
That blood on the ark, so that has to be preserved until the time's right.
Must be.
Yeah, and then when the abomination of desolation is when the man of sin sits on the throne and proclaims himself God.
Right. So whatever he does to profane, because that's what the devil's always trying to get into the midst of something to profane it.
I'm so thankful to run into you guys.
Yeah.
This have confirmation from someone else. We try to tell our friends this, and they just don't. They just don't want to believe it because it's too crazy.
So if you're wondering why they're so interested in Zedekiah's cave, it's because Ron Wyatt found the entrance. There's an actual tunnel that'll take you right to the Ark of the Covenant chamber, and it's sealed off right now because Israel sealed it off.
And then you can also see a wall that Ron Wyatt is standing in here, and let's take a closer look at this wall.
So I'm going to read from a book that was recently published with all of Ron Wyatt's discoveries, and apparently on this gold detector test that they did at the Garden Tomb. In 2016,
36 tests were done using a directional metal detector in order to confirm the Ark of the Covenant. Prior to conducting these tests, the detector was tested to see if it could detect a gold coin about 15 feet away, and next to try and detect an 8-inch 18-karat gold chain about 10 feet away. In both cases, the detector pointed to these objects without failure. Over the course of several days, the detector was used in front of the cutouts in the rock of the crucifixion site of Christ that we had mentioned earlier. Below this area should be the Ark of the Covenant. But could a detector pick up a reading for gold and the Ark at a depth of 50 feet? Tests were done in front of the rock escarpment about 20 feet away, then at 45-degree angles, then over to each side. In every test result, the detector pointed to the correct location of the Ark. After receiving these readings, the detector was positioned over the spot that should be the center of where the detector had been pointing. When placed over this spot, the detector began to spin, meaning the gold is directly below. This was still another confirmation. When moved away from this spot several feet, it would point back to where the Ark should be. It repeated this time after time without failure. The idea then came that the detector should get a real workout. How about trying it from 65 and 100 feet, respectively, from 3 different directions? Could the detector still find the Ark? First, it was positioned at the overlook for Skull Hill, that is a raised platform and about 100 feet from where the Ark should be. Amazingly, it once again pointed to the Ark. Next, it was positioned 65 feet directly out from the rock face, and once again it pointed to the Ark. Finally, it was positioned 100 feet toward the entrance to the Garden Tomb grounds, and once again it pointed to the Ark. In order to get these long-distance test results, there would have to be a large amount of gold in that location. All in all, there were 36 test results. Every test that was done with the detector confirmed there was gold in the direction of the Ark as reported by the late Ron Wyatt. There were no tests that contradicted this site." End quote. So you can see it's starting to spin because the guy is going over that spot again, and whenever this guy goes over that spot, it spins, and whenever he's not at that spot, it points back to that spot. Now, there's more. I'm going to read a personal testimony by a guy named Ian Fain, who is an eyewitness to a video shot in the cave taken by Ron himself. So let me just start reading. This is, by the way, from an email correspondence that he had made with arkdiscovery.com. This may be an appropriate time to mention publicly that I and several other Christians have watched with our own eyes a video which Ron shot inside the cave before the furniture was rearranged. The crack in the roof was clearly visible with the blood still on it. The table was there in close-up, and many piles of skins. The Ark was there, but was covered by a brilliant white light, which hid it from the camera as Ron panned around the cave. To the best of my knowledge, there is only one copy of it in existence, Ron's original, and it's not in America now. It's in a safe place of the Lord's own choosing, to which I once took Aaron Sen, who has met the keeper but has not viewed the tape. I was an eyewitness of Ron's tape of the inside of the cave. I wasn't with him when he shot it, but I saw the tape not very long afterwards. Ron himself was keen that the tape should be seen widely. Events turned out otherwise, however. But for what it's worth, I'm happy to answer any questions I can about the tape and what I saw on it. I last viewed it some years ago, and my visual memory is not great. I'm far better with words. However, by the same token, my visual imagination is pretty bad too, which is probably a good thing for this purpose. My sole purpose in mentioning it here was to help strengthen the faith of some here whose confidence in Ron's word may have been shaken by doubts. How long is the videotape? The section shot inside the cave was part of a longer tape, most of which contained other less dramatic stuff. I'd say there were several minutes of material shot inside the cave. What quality is it? Shaky, steady, on a tripod, in color? Steady and in color. From what I can recall, I'd say it was almost certainly shot using a tripod and a single camera light, which Ron moved about in between shots from one part of the cave to another so as to get pictures of the contents from different angles. What type of lighting used? Good quality or poor? Grainy footage or clear? Single light fixed to the camera. As Ron panned around the cave, the light moved with the camera. Off-center, the edges of the frame were quite dark. The tape was free from grain, but the color balance was not great. I suppose it was NTSC, which in the days when I was a videotape engineer, we used to say stood for never the same color twice. Did you see any angels on the tape? No. Was there a timestamp on the tape itself that was displayed on the screen? Not that I recall, there wasn't. How long ago did you see it? Pass. That information might assist those who want to find the tape. Have you ever talked to Ron about the tape? If so, what did he say? I never talked to him specifically about the tape. I did ask him questions about the Ark, about the tables of stone, and about the Book of the Law. I assumed at the time that everybody who knew anything of Ron's work had seen this tape along with all his other material. It was only when Bill Fry intercepted a post of mine to this list that I realized that this was not so. Even Bill hadn't seen it. The persons who have the tape, are they waiting for the right time to release it? Did Ron give it to him, her, them, or what's the reason for them holding it back? Same answer as to the previous question, I'm afraid. Sorry. From your perspective, is this the tape where Ron took out the tables of stone? Was this before or after the event, if it's not the same footage? No, it's an earlier tape. Neither Ron nor the tables appeared on the tape I saw. How many people were with you when you viewed it, and where did this occur? Australia? Only one person viewed it simultaneously with me, but several others had seen it just a few days previously. One has since gone to be with the Lord, but the others are still alive. The country name is under wraps, as per Q5. Does Ron say anything on the tape? If so, what does he say? No, Ron was the cameraman, but he didn't appear in front of the camera, and I don't recall his giving any verbal commentary on the sequence inside the cave. What does the table of showbread look like? To be honest, it looked dark bronze, but I suppose that was the effect of the camera light, which probably had a predominantly blue spectrum. The table was rectangular and had a raised decorative border a few inches high running all around the top, which what I took to be cast pomegranates at regular intervals. The cave sequence opened with a close-up shot of one corner of the table, showing some fine workmanship in its making. Did you see the 7-branch candlestick, and if so, what did it look like? No, I was consciously looking for it, but I didn't see it. Everybody asked this question. It's the most popular question after the Ark itself. You said you saw the skins piled up in a corner? They weren't piled in a corner. They were heaped everywhere, all over the floor and everything else, lots of them. What conditions were they in? I don't recall any close-ups of the coverings, but the general impression was one of gray dustiness. They were folded up as you would fold a lot of blankets, and some were obviously covering large objects underneath. The menorah may have been on its side under them. Did you see any other object in the cave? And if so, what were they? At the time, I thought this tape was going on general release and that I'd be getting a copy sometime, so I didn't make any mental notes. But I do remember seeing the stone box in which the Ark had been stored, with its lid moved to one side. I have a feeling that Goliath's sword was there, but I have no particular mental image of it. Just that we discussed it between ourselves, and the reason for our discussing it was probably that it was in there. Of course, the dominant feature was the Ark itself, and the fact that it was hidden by a brilliant white light. As Ron panned the camera around, a circle of light moved across the field of view until it filled the whole screen. Then it moved off again at the other edge. Ron's verbal account of this was that the effect was only on the tape. No such light was visible to him inside the cave when he saw the Ark plainly. It was only when he viewed the tape afterwards that he saw the light had covered the Ark for the purpose of the recording. The other notable feature was the crack in the roof of the cave with the dark stain of blood on the one side of it, about the size of one's hand, I should think. The roof was not high. A man would probably have had to stoop to avoid hitting his head. Seeing the blood there was the most moving thing to me. I think if the Lord had wanted somebody to give a detailed account of the tape, he would have chosen somebody other than me to see it. My powers of visual observation and retention are famously bad. My principal contribution to this debate is simply that I can testify to having seen that tape, that it showed exactly what Ron said it did, and that I was awed at what I saw. I think we all were. Did the table of showbread have just one shelf, top one, or any below it too? I only remember seeing the top surface and not much below it. I think it was perhaps partially covered by skins, but it was quite a while ago, and as I mentioned earlier, my visual memory is really terrible. How close to the ceiling was the Ark of the Covenant stone case? Very close. I remember being rather surprised at how low the roof was. I can't give you any meaningful estimate of the exact distance. I'd have to view the tape again to do that, but my memory is that it was about enough to crawl into and not much more. Was the chamber cleared out? Like, was Ron shooting the video from the floor of the chamber, or was he standing on stones, or what? You said he was close to the ceiling. Any thoughts on how close? The chamber was certainly not cleared out. In fact, apart from things like the lid of the stone box, it looked as though nobody had been in there for centuries, as I suppose they hadn't. The place looked like a lumber room, with things everywhere all over the floor, and of course all those heaps of skins, so that you would have to clamber over one thing to look at the next. Ron was about my height, 6 foot, and I'd reckon I'd have to stoop in there, but I think the camera was a foot or more so below head height. Was the stone case that held the Ark in the middle of the chamber, or up against one of the sides? From the opening shot, it was on the right-hand side at the back. If the camera was central, that is, but what with there being so many objects in there, only those in front of the camera being illuminated, and the light in front of the Ark disorienting things a bit, I couldn't swear to it. However, my memory is certainly that it wasn't in the center of the cave. I think it was close to a wall at the back. Did you see any openings into the chamber or the shape of the chamber? No, because of the limited lighting, that wasn't possible. Did it look like a high 8 video or something older? Actually, it didn't look too bad, all things considered. It was a difficult situation for an amateur shoot. I was never into amateur video. I worked with B&W 1-inch tape and 12-inch reels, so I couldn't guess which system it was. The picture quality seemed rather better than some of Ron's other stuff though, so maybe he had taken particular care to get a hold of a good camera. Does the keeper of the video still have the tape? I guess he certainly could, but amazing as it sounds to us here, he has forgotten the cave sequence completely, as Aaron Sen and I discovered when we called upon him for the express purpose of having a look at it, in Aaron's case for the first time. Now, in the context of our uneventful little lives, that sounds hard to believe, that anybody to whom these things mean so much could actually forget such a unique thing in his possession. This man is a spirit-filled believer in the Lord, and is deeply appreciative of the significance of these matters. He supported Ron and contributed significantly to Ron's work, so he isn't ignorant, but he is a man to whom strange and sometimes dangerous things just happen. The same was true of his father, so it runs in the family. I have said sometimes that if and when World War III breaks out, it will be 6 feet away from where this man happens to be standing at that moment. A bit like being the guy who happened to be standing next to Crown Prince Ferdinand when he was shot in 1914. This man has about a dozen of Ron's tapes, but he has not sat down and cataloged them, and to do so would necessarily take up a fair bit of time. His wife, too, is the CEO of a multi-million-dollar business. I hope I have given you something of the picture. People like this do not sit around in the evenings flicking through the TV channels. They live very full and sometimes dangerous lives. But for all that, it would be hard to think of a more suitable man to be keeper of something like this. He is completely fearless, and he is very well aware of what is going on in the world behind the scenes. His friends and contacts are too.
Christ died and the earth shook and the rocks were rent, a crack came right down the entire face of the escarpment, right past the left side of the cross hole, and the stone opened up. Down below, 20 feet below, God had arranged for the Ark of the Covenant with its mercy seat, if you please, his earthly throne, to be positioned right down there 600 years before, in 586 BC, when the Babylonian army destroyed the city. When the centurion stuck his spear in Christ's spleen and probably left ventricle to make sure he was dead before he gave the body to Joseph of Arimathea, when he pulled that spear out, the separated platelets and serum of the blood of the Son of God gushed out, went down through that crack onto the mercy seat. And that ratified the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. The fourth trip I made into this chamber, it was spotless. The furnishings were set in perfect order. The Ark of the Covenant, however, had been placed against the wall, the end of the cave. The end of the cave was a beautiful crystal radiating the colors of the rainbow. Now, I know New Age and all that goes in for rainbows, so do homosexuals and all of that. But God used it first, all right? It's around his throne, and it's around his earthly throne. Now, there's no veil in this setup, so it is the earthly, it's God's temple on earth, or his residence where he once dwelt. And anyway, when I found it like this, there were 4 young men standing in there. And I started to say, you know, what are you doing here? And I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything. One of the people said, we are the 4 angels that have been taking care of the ark since Moses put the tables of stone in it, right? And they instructed me to set up my video camera with the tripod, aim it at the Ark of the Covenant, and they went over, lifted the mercy seat up. I don't know how heavy it is. I've never tried to lift it, but it's solid gold. And the angel said, take the tables of stone out of there. God wants everyone to see those. I took them out. All right. They put the mercy seat back down over the Ark of the Covenant. I backed away a little bit. The angel came, got the tables of stone, put them on a rock ledge inside the chamber, and I was then instructed to take a sample of the blood from the mercy seat, have that analyzed, and I did everything the angel told me to do.
My question is that you said that you had the blood of our Lord examined by the Israelis.
That's correct.
What was their determination of that?
Okay. Real quickly, okay. Dried blood is dead blood. Everybody knows that, all right? They can test the blood of the pharaohs, the mummies of the pharaohs, all right? There's certain things they can do. They cannot get a chromosome count by any method I'm familiar with, all right? Things keep changing. I don't profess to know everything. However, there's no way I know that you can get a chromosome count out of dead blood. You can get a DNA and some other things, but not a chromosome count, all right? That's done by living white blood cells. Now then, first of all, in this analysis, I took the blood into a laboratory in Israel. I asked one of the people I work with in antiquities, where is a good laboratory that does reliable work? And they said, such and such, such and such. I took it. I just said, please examine this blood and tell me what you can tell me about it. All right? They said, well, look, we're going to reconstitute it. We're going to put it in normal saline and keep it at body temperature for 72 hours with gentle swirling. All right, that's their business. That's great. I said, now I want to be there when you check it out. They said, fine. So I was back. They checked it out. I said, now, they said it's human blood. We can tell that. They did whatever tests they need to do. And then I said, take some of the white blood cells and put them in a growth medium and keep them at body temperature for 48 hours. And they said, well, that'll do no good because it's dead blood. I said, would you please do that for me? And they said, okay, we'll do it. So anyway, I said, I want to be there when you take it out and examine it. So I was back there. They took it out, examined it under a microscope, and the one technician called the other one over there, and then they called the boss over there, and they were talking Hebrew a mile a minute there for a little bit, and they looked at me and they said, Mr. Wyatt, this human blood only has 24 chromosomes in it. Everybody else has 46. You see, 23 from your mother, 23 from your father, 22 autosomes from your mother, 22 autosomes from your father. You get an X from your mother, you may get an X or a Y from your father, all right? This blood had 23 chromosomes from the mother's side, one Y chromosome only. You see, the child could not have developed if they hadn't had the autosomes from the mother. So all of his physical characteristics were determined by his mother's side of the family, her autosomes. His maleness was determined by this one Y that came from a source, not a human male. Then they said, this blood is alive. And then they said, whose blood is this? I said, it's the blood of your Messiah. And I assure you, those men's lives have changed.